Hi, everybody, and a very pleasant good evening to you wherever you may be. Lucky Strike's blowing smoke rings at you from the studios of Comfortably Zoned Radio. And it's time for Dodgers Baseball, a tale of two cities from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. I'm your host, Peter Trunk, and my co-host is Ron Rabinovitz. Ron, how are you?
Good, Peter. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. I'm doing fine.
Good.
I'm excited about tonight. We have, once again, one of our favorite guests of all time, baseball historian Bill Hall. And he's here. He's going to talk about two really interesting characters from the Brooklyn Dodger days. One is a left-hander known as the Preacher, and the other one is a right-hander who had one of the most sensational rookie seasons in the history of baseball. But I'll let him tell us who he's going to start with and who these people actually are. And here's my good friend Bill Hall. Bill?
Good evening, Peter. Good evening, Ron. And thank you for the opportunity to join you once again.
Welcome back, Bill.
Yeah, thank you. Why don't we start off with Mr. Elwyn Rowe, better known as Preacher Rowe. And certainly, I think, one of the great pitchers of the Boys of Summer era, and really one of the great characters of that Dodger team as well. You know, it wasn't until after his retirement following the 1954 season that he made the big confession. It came in the pages of Sports Illustrated the following summer that, yes, in fact, he had thrown a spitball. That was his main, not his main pitch, but it was his money pitch when everything was really on the line. That was what he would resort to, and so, his biography on the Society for American Baseball Research website says he wasn't telling National League hitters anything that they didn't know already. Preacher, he was a good old country boy, born in Arkansas, and when he got to Brooklyn in 1948, along with his friend and teammate Billy Cox, he found that the reporters really wanted to play him up as the country bumpkin from the sticks of Arkansas. So he went right along with that, although actually his father was a doctor, and when he was signed for the major leagues, actually by Branch Rickey's brother for the St. Louis Cardinals, he was just one semester away from finishing his college degree. But Preacher, the country bumpkin, was what they wanted, so he was happy to oblige.
Preacher Rowe was an enigma. He pitched fairly well, if I remember his stats for Pittsburgh Pirates. But Pittsburgh was such a horrible, horrible ball club that his one-loss record was not especially outstanding. Once he got to Brooklyn, though, he had years like, if memory serves, 22-3, 11-3, 11-2. He had quite a one-loss record for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and being that I was born in 1946, I didn't really get to see Preacher Rowe. By the time he quit baseball in 1954, that's just about the time I was becoming a fan. I remember watching the Giants and the Indians, and the reason I remember watching it was because of that big smiling Indian face on the scoreboard in Cleveland, and that struck me, and that's my first recollection really of anything solid with baseball. And then of course I followed the Dodgers in '55, and I'm so glad I did, because that was the year, boy. But Elwyn the Preacher was gone by then, and so I really didn't. And so was Billy Cox, as a matter of fact. Cox had not retired but had moved to Baltimore. So I, as a Dodger fan, in the flesh, Dodger fan, do not recall at all either Rowe or Cox, and I just have to rely on my history and my reading and older fellows myself, not too many of them around anymore, for memories of those two fellows. But please continue about Preacher.
I remember both of them, Peter, in Milwaukee when they were pitching. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How do you like that?
53 and 54, yeah. Yeah.
That's
because that's the year 53 was when I met Jackie. And
wow.
Preacher Rowe was there. Joe Black was there, So, yeah, I watched them, but Billy Cox was there. Yeah.
As you mentioned, Peter, that actually as a Pirate one year, I think it was 1945, that Preacher Rowe led the league in strikeouts by a pitcher. So, yeah, he did have good stuff, but he didn't have much of a one-loss record exactly for the reason you mentioned. I mean, like a reporter once said to him, well, what's it like having a double play combination like Pee Wee Reese and Jackie Robinson backing you up? And he said, oh, fantastic. Compared to when I was in Pittsburgh, it was like a couple of goalposts were out there.
Right. I read that. I read that quote. Yeah, a couple of goalposts. Wow.
Yeah. Wow. And then, of course, not too shabby at the corners either, with Gil Hodges and Billy Cox, each, widely acclaimed as the best at their positions. So Preacher said he really should have paid to play on a team like that. And that brings to mind a story from the Boys of Summer, and if you guys would indulge me, it's a little long. I'll try to condense it, but to me it's one of the funniest things in the whole book. Preacher had a great year in 1949. He gets home. He keeps waiting for his contract to arrive in the mail from general manager Branch Rickey, but he said one winter day, Mr. Rickey instead comes driving up, climbs out, sits there on the porch with him, finally tells him, you're a great pitcher. I think of you almost like you're my son, so I really don't know what to pay you, but I brought you a present. A couple of hunting dogs jump out of the back of the wagon, and then as Preacher is thanking Mr. Rickey for this wonderful gift, he hands him a contract with the salary figure blank, telling him to fill in what he thinks is right. So, and then Branch Rickey goes driving back toward Brooklyn. Well, okay, I'm going to read just a couple of paragraphs here. After he'd gone, I commenced thinking what a fine thing he'd done, how much trust he had put in me. I took the original figure I had, knocked $1,000 off of it. A day or so later, I go hunting. I run them dogs up and down the hills and bag me a mess of quail. Got back, thought some more, knocked off another $2,500. Next day was the best day ever hunting, and he decides he'd really been greedy. So finally he takes the contract, fills in a number $10,000 under his original figure, walks to the corner, drops the contract in the mail. When he got home, he found out the two dogs had jumped the fence and taken off. He said they didn't stop running until they got back to Mr. Rickey's house in Brooklyn. I mean, how can you not love a man like that?
Yeah, that is so funny.
That is a great story.
Another fantastic thing about Preacher, and I really think this is one of the reasons why we fans of a certain age, I'm a couple of years younger than you guys, but I think of us basically as of the same generation, why we can relate to the players of this era so much more than we ever can to the fragile multimillionaires of today.
Sure.
When Preacher Rowe retired and went home to Arkansas, he you know what he did? He went out and bought the local supermarket, and he ran it for 20 years. And you may recall on our Brooklyn Dodger pages on Facebook when I had Preacher Rowe week recently, there were a couple of pictures of Preacher at his supermarket.
Yes.
I mean,
I saw that, yeah.
Preacher selling groceries, Gil Hodges running his bowling alley, Pee Wee, running his bowling alley and golf course, and of course Jackie had not only his executive position with chock full of nuts, but his activities in the civil rights movement. These were guys doing things I think that fans could relate to much more directly than these guys now, who are probably, as soon as they retire, they sit down with their team of investment advisors and lawyers and are negotiating, multi-million-dollar deals. And, it was just a different world, a much more relatable
different world, right.
Yeah, it is different. It is different.
Can't be at the liquor store.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes.
And, yeah.
Would you guys mind if I veered off topic for a moment there with Campy?
Not at all.
Because, again, one of my favorite stories. It involves Campy and Gil Hodges. And me and my man Gil. So, and as you mentioned, Campy had a liquor store in Manhattan. And one day the Dodgers are playing the Giants at the Polo Grounds, and a fight breaks out in the upper deck. And Gil points it out to Campy and says, "Hey, looks like a couple of your customers are going at it, Campy." And Campy laughs and says, "No, sir. I don't sell any of that fighting liquor in my store. I only sell happy liquor."
Oh, that's funny.
That's good.
That is very good.
Something else about Preacher Row, it seems like really, sadly, so many of the starting players for the Dodgers, went to their eternal reward far too young. Jackie, of course, Gil, both around 50. Billy Cox was only 58. But for whatever reason, a lot of the pitchers have been blessed with nice long lives. As a matter of fact, I believe this day that we're recording this program is Big Don Newcomb's 91st birthday, and God bless him and many more. But Preacher lived to be 92, and in his later years, he was a regular at Dodger fantasy camps, and all the stories you see from people who attended those camps said what a warm and wonderful and friendly and approachable man he was. When his beloved wife, who had been truly his childhood sweetheart, when she finally passed on a few years before Preacher's own demise, he took off a couple of years, to nurse her through her final illness, but then he returned, and they said one piece of advice he offered to campers every year was, "Men, live every day like it's your last, because one day you'll be right."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about that. Talk about country wisdom. Yeah, and we mentioned Billy Cox, and an interesting thing I think about Preacher is he and Billy were both on the Pirates together. They were traded to Brooklyn together in the Dixie Walker deal, which a lot of people say was the best trade in the history of the Brooklyn Dodgers, because even though
certainly one of them. Yep.
Yeah, Dixie had been a mainstay for the Dodgers for a long time, but he was 37 years old and really had passed his peak. And then after their 7 years together in Brooklyn, they were sold together to Baltimore, as I believe you mentioned, but Preacher had already told Walter O'Malley that he was done. He was not going to play in 1955, and so he stuck to that. Billy did try to continue in Baltimore, but found that he was at the end of the line as well. So, talk about a guy who was just really a mainstay on the pitching staff for those boys this summer.
Sure was.
And
he sure was.
Getting back to that spitball and to Billy Cox, he would moisten it with beechnut gum. That's one of the things he disclosed in his Sports Illustrated confessional, because he said he always, for whatever reason, he got the right kind of saliva from beech nut gum, and if the umpires ever got suspicious and called for the ball, he would bend over, roll it over to Billy Cox, who would then throw it into the umpire. And, of course, that little exercise would remove any traces of beech nut spit. Another interesting and unusual thing about Preacher that was asked, I think, on one of our Dodger pages on Facebook, and why he didn't pitch in the 1951 playoff series against the Giants. And he had it in his contract that he only would pitch on 4 days rest because he knew that was how he would be most effective. And so he did not have a pitching turn come up during that short series. Had justice prevailed or had the telescope trick by the Giants been captured, that very possibly Preacher probably would have opened up the World Series, but for the Dodgers, but it just wasn't meant to be.
You know, the funny thing about the 51 World Series, O'Malley had it all planned to break out the new Dodger uniforms for the 51 World Series with the red numbers on the front of their home uniforms, and of course that was that had to hold off until spring training of '52 because the Dodgers, of course, didn't make it there. But it's so much fun to read all these things about. Well, since you just mentioned 51, I'll stick with 51 just for a second.
Sure.
It's all these things at 51 when you see how the pitchers that the Dodgers did use, they used over and over and over and over again. The worst I've ever seen. Now, admittedly, I was not glued to my radio in 1951 as a 5-year-old. So I've read many books and articles and talked to people and stuff, and these guys, they use them on a Monday, they use them on a Wednesday, they use them on a Thursday, they use them on a Saturday. They just kept using the same guys over and over. When I got a little bit older and I experienced the collapse of the 1964 Philadelphia Phillies, I guess I saw firsthand as a grown-up kid. Let's see, in '64, what was I, 17 or 18? Gene Mauch using 2 pitchers down the stretch in '64 when he panicked. When the Phillies were ahead, I don't know, I'm going to take a guess. They were ahead by 5.5 with 11 to play, something like that. But they just kept losing and losing and losing and losing. And he kept pitching the same 2 guys.
Bunting and Short, yep.
Bunting and Short, over and over and over and over again. He just kept running them out there. And I guess that's what Dressen did. You know, and he also did it in '52 with Joe Black. I mean, talk about running a pitcher into the ground. It's just incredible. It was absolutely incredible. And
I haven't been keeping track of time, so I don't know if you want to move on to Joe Black yet, but that might
go ahead, sure, whatever you want. Well, one thing
whenever you want.
We can't leave Preacher Row without mentioning his wonderful Game 2 shutout of the Yankees in 1949. When the Dodgers had lost the day before 1-0 on a home run given up by Don Newcomb in the bottom of the 9th inning to Big Johnny Mize of the Yankees. They lost a heartbreaker 1-0, and the very next day, the Dodgers sent Preacher out to the mound, and Preacher shut the Yankees down and won the second game 1-0. That was a very, very tough ball game, and he did a great job. Rowe did in Yankee Stadium that day. But yes, we can move on to Joe Black.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about, again, unlike Preacher, who enjoyed several great seasons for the Boys of Summer, Joe Black only had one, 1952, but what a season it was. He was a 28-year-old rookie in large part because of the fact that Joe Black was black, an African American, and did not.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it, Bill?
Yeah, really.
Sounds familiar. Monty Irvin, Jackie Robinson, they all come up at 28. I guess they needed that extra seasoning, you know.
Yeah, but
right.
Yeah, he was with the Baltimore Elite Giants, the same team that gave Campy, his seasoning in the Negro Leagues, and signed by the Dodgers, and just really exploded on the big league scene in 1952. He and Jackie were roommates that year.
Yes, they were.
Pardon me?
They were roommates, yes.
Yeah.
Ronnie?
And Joe won 15 games that year. He saved 15 more. His ERA was 2.15, and he pitched 142 innings. If he had just had 8 innings more that year, he would have qualified for the ERA title as well. Mm-hmm. So really an absolute bang-up season, one of the great rookie seasons of all time. And then Dressen did something, just another odd Charlie Dressen thing that almost paid off. Even though he had been a reliever all season long, by the end of the year, Dressen's pitching staff was pretty much worn out. So he made Black a starter for the series. This was unusual, but not totally unheard of in that era. I mean, what was it? I think the 1950 World Series where Jim Constanti had been such a relief star for the Phillies, but he was used as a starter in that series.
Yes, he was.
So Black won the first game of that 1952 World Series, a 6-hitter over Allie Reynolds. It was a notable game in several aspects. It was the first time the Dodgers ever won the opening game of a World Series, and that also made him the first African-American pitcher to ever win a World Series game.
Ever win a World Series game, huh?
Yeah, but unfortunately, that was all the magic that Joe Black had left in his arm. He lost Game 4 of that series 2-0, and then Game 7 4-2. So once again, the Dodgers were left waiting till next year.
Right. It's not that Black got rocked in his next 2 starts, but right.
He was overworked though.
Lost 2-0 and 4-2.
Yeah.
That's nothing to be ashamed of. It's not like he got, he didn't make it out of the first inning or something like that. But, Dressen did overuse him. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
That's okay. No. Very good point. He had really overworked him, and then the next year, unfortunately, that was when the consensus is he truly ruined Joe Black.
Exactly.
Joe Black had a good, solid fastball and a curveball that, at least from what I've read, unfortunately never got to see him in action, that his curve really didn't break very much, that it would be more of what would probably be called a slider today.
Mm-hmm.
But, that wasn't good enough for Charlie Dressen. And, unfortunately this is, they say even today, kind of accepted baseball wisdom, which, for what it's worth, sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, that a major league pitcher, they always say, needs more than 2 pitches to be effective. So Charlie Dressen insisted that he learn a 3rd pitch, either a big breaking curve or a more effective change of pace, just something different. And so, the results when he tried to do that were pretty much disastrous. I mean,
Yes.
he lost his control, he lost his effectiveness, and, he only won 6 games in 1953 after having that amazing year in 1952, and by 1955 he was gone from Brooklyn. He had very brief stops with the Cincinnati Reds and then the Washington Senators, but what really could have been a great major league career of several seasons ended up being one sensational season essentially.
Well, if you look at his ERA, 2.15 was it?
Yep.
In 52. Okay, here's a guy, 2.15 ERA. He pitched 142 plus innings in relief, won 15 games, saved another how many?
15.
Another 15. And the manager wants him to learn another pitch?
Yeah.
If I'm O'Malley, I fire Dressen as soon as he says that.
Right.
Well, you guys probably already know the famous line about Charlie Dressen and his opinion of his baseball brilliance, that supposedly the Dodgers were in a jam one day and he turned to the players on the bench and said, "Don't worry, boys, I'll think of something."
You know what? He said that. He not only said that exact quote that you just mentioned, but he paraphrased it and used it over and over. "Keep it close, boys. I'll think of something." He used to say that over and over all the time.
Yes, he did.
He really thought he was a genius. I mean, he was so worried about DeRocher getting the headlines and not him. That was his whole shtick. His whole shtick was,
right?
Yeah, his whole shtick was, I won 90 something games. The Dodgers lost 57. Okay, so whatever happened positively, it was I, me in the post game when he would talk to the writers. And then when they would lose, it was, well, the left fielder didn't hit the cutoff man, the second baseman didn't turn the double play. It was always the player's fault when they lost, and it was always him that got the victories. And you know what? I can't handle a guy like that.
No,
I really can't. I can't handle a guy. I really can't.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He was a bad guy. He really he wore out Joe Black like crazy. I mean, that 1 year, my God, he was such a workhorse.
Very sad, and yet even though Joe Black did not enjoy the lengthy major league career he probably should have, I think he did really wonderful things with the rest of his life. And if anybody listening, is interested in delving into Joe Black's story in a little more depth, I really recommend that they look up a book called Joe Black, More Than a Dodger, written by his daughter, Martha Jo, because, most baseball biographies dwell on a guy's major league career, and the years afterwards are almost a footnote. But one of the things I really liked about Martha Jo's book was that she went into some depth on her father's post-baseball life, and I really think it had a lot of variety and a lot of interest. He scouted for the Washington Senators for a couple of years. He taught health and physical education in junior high school. But where I think he really found himself was with an executive position with Greyhound bus lines. And, I get the impression that Greyhound sought him out because they realized, a lot of their customers were African American, and they wanted to have somebody who, frankly, could be a bridge to the African American community, make sure that they were meeting their customers' needs, and someone internally who could work to promote job opportunities for African Americans, especially on the executive side of the organization. And he was quite proud of his work with Greyhound. But, you know, he stayed connected with baseball as well. He worked with the commissioner's office and essentially mentored young players, kind of helped them deal with what Major League life was all about, making good choices. Later in life, he joined the board of the baseball assistance team, BAT, you know, the charity. I believe Joe Garagiola was the original instigator of that group to basically provide help to former major leaguers who were down on their luck. And, you know, he had settled in Arizona, and when the Arizona Diamondbacks joined the National League in '98, they hired him in a community relations position. And so he stayed involved in baseball right up until the end of his life, 2002, when he passed away from cancer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Joe was the original all-around Jersey boy. Yeah, he was a Jersey boy.
Was he?
Yeah. Yeah, we used to, the neighborhoods used to talk about him. Even after he was retired, I used to hear his name come up here and there and, you know, amateur baseball stuff and what have you. I saw him one time, too. I don't know where he was appearing. I think he was either appearing at a Dodge Plymouth place or a Chrysler showroom or something like that. And I was amazed at how huge he was. He was built like a house. He was
big
huge.
Man, yes.
Wow.
He had big hands. Oh, my God, his hands were so big.
Very big guy, man.
Yeah,
very
big guy. You're right.
Very big. And just, you know, just as that amazed me, I remember when I saw him, I was amazed at how big he was. Many years later, when I met and spoke with Wayne Terwilliger, who had a major league career and a cup of coffee with the 51 Dodgers, I couldn't believe how small he was.
Yeah.
Just the opposite. I never saw anybody that small. I've seen women bigger than Wayne Terwilliger. I mean, with more muscle mass, what have you.
Yeah,
I came home I talked to him for hours one day at a Dodger weekend. And what a great guy. Anyway, he told me a lot of stories. One of them very, very interesting in that when he coached for Ted Williams in Washington, that he actually called all the plays. Ted didn't call anything. Ted didn't call the bunts, didn't call the steals, didn't call the sacrifices, didn't call the pitching changes. Wayne Terwilliger said, I was the manager, really. Ted was the figurehead. And at the time, Terwilliger was about 88 years old when I met him, and he was still the third base coach for the Fort Worth Cats.
No kidding.
Yeah, he was still active, in uniform, active. But hugging him and shaking his hand and spending time with him and stuff, and I'm looking at the guy, I said, how could this guy play Major League Baseball? And I came back and I saw that he hit home runs and everything. I mean, he had like, I think, just off the top of my head, he had like 11 home runs lifetime. And I'm saying, how could this guy hit all? He's like 100 pounds. He's like 5 feet tall. He was the smallest guy I ever saw in my life. You know, two of the biggest ball players I ever saw was Joe Black when I was very young, and then a little tiny bit older, Frank Howard, outside of the players' entrance at the Polo Grounds in 62 or 3 with the Dodgers. He was 6'7", 300 pounds. And then Wayne Terwilliger, when I saw him and met him, it's not like I saw him on television and said, wow, he's small. I'm standing right next to the guy. I could have picked him up with one arm. I could have picked him off the ground with one arm. I could not believe it. And here's a major league baseball player.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't come up for 2 at-bats. He was up there. And he played for some teams, you know.
Yeah.
I saw Frank Howard one time come out of a Volkswagen in Milwaukee. Funniest thing you ever saw in your life. When he came out, it was like he just kept coming out. It was unbelievable.
I can't even imagine that. Well,
he was big. He was a big guy.
He was a big, strong guy. Frank Howard was a big, strong guy. You know, back in the day when they had batting practice and fielding practice and all that stuff before the game, I used to get there when they opened the gates at the Polo Grounds, and Frank Howard, at the end of batting practice for the visiting team, the home team used to hit first, and then the visitors would hit second. And as they were, they'd be collapsing the back, the screen that goes behind the hitters because they didn't want to lose all those baseballs. They were, and the players were jumping in for one swing and one swing only, and they were playing long ball. And Dodgers had Moose Skowron and Ron Fairley and you know, and Frank Howard and all, and they were all jumping in. They were trying to hit the longest ball before batting practice was totally finished over. And the one pitch that Frank Howard got was like way outside and high. He swung at it with one arm. He reached over the plate and swung at it with his left arm, and it short hopped the fence in left center field at the Polo Grounds. That's how strong he was.
Gravy. Wow.
That's how strong he was.
Yeah.
I saw him hit a home run in Milwaukee. I thought the ball was going into orbit. I never seen anything like that. It was unbelievable.
Well, remember the home run he hit in the '63 series off of Whitey Ford?
Yeah.
He hit a home run at Yankee Stadium. Now, a lot of guys hit up in the third deck in right field at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
Not too many guys hit it up in the third deck in left field, and that's where Frank Howard hit it. He hit it in the third deck in left field off of Whitey Ford in the '63.
Can you imagine how long that ball was? I mean, how many feet?
Boy.
Oh, my God.
Amazing.
Yeah, just amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, he could really hit it.
Wow.
Such good memories.
So, we have any more about Joe Black or no?
Oh, I think we kind of hit the highlights of his long and remarkable life. A good man who brought honor to the Dodgers and was, I think, a very positive force in the game throughout his life.
Yep, I think so, too.
Same way with Preacher Rowe. Good men.
Oh, yeah.
Good pitchers, and even more importantly, good men.
Good men.
Yes, more importantly. Very well put.
Yep.
Right.
Well,
absolutely.
We seem to have come to an end to another program. We had a good time. I did anyway. I thought that was great. That was really good. And, Bill, you have a very, very busy schedule. I don't know how you read all these books and do all these things on the Internet with the schedule that you have. You're all over the place. You're crazy. I don't know how you have the energy to do all that. But that being said, that being said, it's an open invitation to you. You get in touch with me by instant message, and you tell me when you want to come on. You know we're on Tuesday nights. When you want to come on, when you're free, who you want to talk about. You have an open door. There's an open door policy for you. Don't wait for me to invite you. Just tell me when you can be on and what you want to talk about, and everything will be fine. That is an open invitation. I'm sure I speak for Ronnie when I say that.
Absolutely.
There you go.
It's always a pleasure.
I will take you guys up on that. Not this current week, but next week on the pages, we're going to celebrate Pistol Pete, and he'd probably be worthy of at least part of a program. And so let's keep that in mind, and let's do that soon. Okay?
Sounds great.
Before you start,
love it.
before you start your studying of Pistol Pete Reeser, let me play devil's advocate and see if I can throw you a curveball, if I may, good-naturedly. All right. Pistol Pete Reeser batted left-handed and he batted right-handed, but he was not a switch hitter. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Oh,
okay. So good luck in your study of him, and and I'll follow you closely on Facebook, all those pages, and during Pete Reeser Week. But I want you to see if you can solve that little mystery that I just threw at you.
I'll work on it.
It's an extremely interesting fact, or set of facts, however you want to say it. But I take this opportunity to thank my co-host again, Ron Rabinovitz, and Bill Hall. Thank you very much. We had a wonderful time. I did, and we have to do this. We have to do this. We have to do this very soon again. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and have a good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.